on the OVI.
So it's delayed.
So we are live.
Okay.
So good evening, everybody. That was such an inspirational movie. It's really overwhelming. So we are lucky we're gonna continue the discussion here with Eva Jimenez and Molly. I will not try, I'm gonna let them introduce themselves. It might be easier, and then we'll go from the questions. Eva? Okay, or Molly, can you hear me?
I can. Can you hear me?
Okay, yes.
Okay. Hi, everybody. My name is Molly Heck. I teach at California State University, Chico in women's studies and in social work. And I loved seeing the chat. I'm looking forward to the conversation and just happy to be a part of this. Thank you to Miriam for helping us out. And we'll see how this goes.
Thank you, Molly. Eva?
Shoot. I don't think she can hear.
Let me see. Okay.
Hi, good evening. I think there is a delay in the Zoom video, so just bear with us. But again, my name is Eva Jimenez, and I am currently Assistant Superintendent, Vice President of Economic Workforce Development at Shasta College and the Executive Director of the Shasta College Foundation. So I'm going to keep talking because now I can hear my voice behind me. Again, we just kind of go with the flow here. It's just a pleasure to be here with Molly and Miriam and Teresa and everybody. Thank you for the invitation. Looking forward to the discussion.
Okay. So we'll go ahead and we'll start with the first question, which is, I don't know, how do you feel to hear the women interviewed in 9 to 5 talk about their working conditions? Did any of the stories surprise you? Why or why not? Who wanna go first?
I can jump in
Yes.
just to get us started and say that I wasn't surprised in that, you know, I've known about these working conditions as someone who is in the women's studies field and, you know, has listened to the herstory and history of, you know, women's rights movements and civil rights movements. But I'll say it always impacts me. It always impacts me in emotional ways and psychological ways. And, you know, folks in the chat were having all kinds of memories of experiences of their own workplace or maybe other folks that they knew. And I think one of the things that I walk away with from this film is, and in so much of my activist and advocacy work, is how much work was done before I ever entered the scene, and really thanking the hard work of activists and advocates who have really paved the way. I mean, I'm like getting chills with realizing that Kamala Harris, you know, is on the backs of these women too. And that is just incredible to me.
Thank you.
And I'll go ahead and add to
something?
that, related to that question. You know, the film, again, it did not surprise me in terms of the conversations and the experiences that these women were feeling. Unfortunately, we continue to have some of those similar experiences today, 50 years later. So it wasn't surprising at all. Certainly inspiring in terms of, I always think of the word resilience, and resilience is really an important word when I think of, movements and people coming together, and even again, my own personal experience is that without resilience, I don't think much is accomplished. But again, these women were a great example of what resiliency can do for all of us, for all women. In terms of what was the second part of that question, Miriam? I apologize. And you're on mute now, but that's okay. One of the stories that fascinated me in this screening was the one related to the tampon machines, and I kind of chuckled when I heard that story, because it wasn't that long ago, even at Shasta College, where I was sitting in a room advocating for feminine products in our bathrooms. We have tampon machines, yes, we do, but they do cost money. And again, when you're talking about equality and ensuring that, ladies can afford these products, it can be a challenge. And so here I was in a room full of, males, explaining how it was important that we make these products free to our students. And again, it wasn't that long ago that this conversation was had. And so I just chuckled a little bit, because, we're not necessarily lobbying for tampon machines, but now it's more about they should be free, for our students, and we should make them available. So again, just some things have changed and have become a little easier, but we continue to have some of the same challenges.
Mm-hmm.
And that takes us to our second question from Heather Wiley. She would like to know, what does gender inequality in the workplace look like today? I think Eva touched a little bit on that.
Mm-hmm.
Molly, you want to say something?
Well, I would, our panelists, or not our panelists, our audience, and again, it was so active in the chat. The gender wage gap is a huge sort of marker of how inequality in the workplace is still playing out in an economic kind of way. And we know that it's racialized as well. And it's really important to pay attention to that as, again, such a clear indicator that that there is gender inequality. So, even in my own institution, I have plenty of colleagues who, just as examples, right, who know that women, we're not often taught to negotiate our salaries when we start, and we'll just take whatever the minimum is that's offered. And because of all kinds of gender norms and scripts, and how we talk to women and talk to men, and men, people with male privilege, tend to negotiate their salaries in a really different way. And so I have colleagues at Chico State who know that they didn't get as much as in a starting salary as they found out some of their male identified colleagues have. So as I'm speaking, I'm also really wanting to recognize that the gender pay gap and all those statistics still maintain sort of this gender binary, right? And we know that there are folks who fall outside of, strictly woman and man categories. And so even looking at how are we counting the gender wage gap, because gender identity is much more complex, right, than the binaries that we're accounting for at this point. And that again is another kind of oppression that folks are experiencing in the workplace.
And I'll add a little bit to that, Molly. I think when it comes to gender equality, there's, obviously the economic piece of it in terms of pay, but I also feel that, at least in my experience, there's also the social equality. And examples, again, you can be sitting in a meeting or in a room with men and women, and for some reason a man can say the very exact same sentence you said just a minute ago, but yet they're the ones that are heard. And you know, that makes it really difficult, or they are the ones that are validated, right? And they respond to them quicker than they do to a female. So again, we continue to see that, unfortunately. And then there's the pay, like you said. When I was teaching business, I would tell all of my students, especially the young ladies, you know, always negotiate your salary. Because we know that for a fact. Even today, there are articles, you can probably pull one up from last week, you know, about the fact that women, again, continue to struggle and be equal pay and learn to negotiate and don't settle. So that's just a really strong message for all women.
Mhm.
Yeah. Wow. Well, thank you. I'll go with the next question. What is the most difficult situation you faced as a woman in the workplace, and how did you handle it?
Yeah, I'll start this one, Molly, if that's okay. Yeah, that's a great question. And there are so many examples, and I was trying to think of one that wouldn't get me into too much trouble. So, you know, I think I learned this, unfortunately, I had a very unfortunate incident happen when I was, I would say, mid-20s, you know, learning to work my way up the banking world and banking back again in the early, it was probably 2005. You know, it was male dominated, primarily white males that were in the banking world. And as I'm learning again, trying to work my way up the ladder, you know, men even at that point felt it was okay to sexually harass, you know, females, and it wasn't necessarily in your face, but you know, they knew when to make the comment. They knew exactly how to play the game. And you know, there was one gentleman in particular who unfortunately kind of crossed that line. You know, you learn to play the game as well, by the way, as a female, and you have to, unfortunately. But he did cross the line, and decided to touch me inappropriately in an office. And that's when it kind of, you know, I decided I needed to now do something about it, and went to HR. And this is where it gets a little bit comical and infuriating, really, all at the same time, is that HR decided that the best way to deal with this is to silence me, one, and they gave me the week off, and that I should just stay home and kind of work through this by myself at home. There wasn't any counseling or anything offered to me, but yet he was then sent to a special training for men in dealing with this. And so he just had to go to, I believe it was a 2-day training on how to not do this in the workplace. And again, very painful. I remember, again, even just kind of struggling with it. And had to go back to work a week later and see him and pretend like nothing had happened. And so again, I think that was really, really a difficult situation. Learned a lot from it. You know, in the movie, we hear somebody said something like, sometimes a bad boss is the best organizer. And for me, in my life experience, I feel that sometimes all of the negative experiences and difficult experiences for me have really driven me in the right direction and have inspired me to make change. So that's my one example. And again, I have many, but we don't have time.
Wow.
And I'll just say that
Thank you.
one of the things that I've been really fortunate with, I guess, in my career, is that I've had female bosses who identify as feminist, and I knew that it would be different because of that. And I count them as, you know, incredibly significant mentors in my life in the workforce, right? But I knew very specifically that my experience would be different because of who they were. And so for folks who might be new to the workforce, pay attention to who is going to be your boss and make choices based on that, because ask your potential employers about their politics, ask them about their politics at work, ask them about their HR policies, ask to get to know them, because it does make a difference and you have power and choice in that.
Oh, thank you. I'm definitely feeling I'm empowered or fortunate.
Right.
I'll take Kylie had a comment. She said that today looks like a lack of access to affordable and safe childcare might be one of the inequality, one of the issues. And also that Teresa said, my experience in the past has been a controlling spouse, not allowing me to advance my education and pursuing advancement in my career, more of a domestic violence situation. So we can see that sometimes women they have the struggle at work and they also have it at home. So to be able to juggle it and balance all of it and be productive and pursue their goals and be successful can be more of a struggle. Anything that you can say to someone who is in that situation?
Yes, absolutely. I think, I think you need to run and run fast. And I always tell, any young female that is asking me for advice is you need to surround yourself with people who are going to lift you and not bring you down, and people who are going to support you. And that comes, again, unfortunately, Teresa, it's truly unfortunate that even your own spouse, would hold you back. And, for myself being Latina, I think that that's also something that's come into play in terms of, what is a traditional Latina, woman to do. Typically, you are to bear children, have a family, and stay at home. And so that's been a difficult part for me, even growing up, the expectations, and even my own high school counselor, who said, you're not going to take college prep courses because you're not going to college. You're going to probably get pregnant and be a mom. And so, and that's a whole different topic when it comes to, again, the biases and, behind, again, who we are and how we look. But, my advice, again, unfortunately, we do have a lot of domestic violence, and we have men who like to bring women down, both, the mental abuse, the psychological abuse, and the physical abuse. And I think, in the end, I think men are scared. I really do. I think men are becoming more and more scared by women, and by, again, the fact that if we become educated, then it's very intimidating for them, and it is a scary place for them. And the world is changing, and we've had yesterday was a historical moment, our first female vice president of our nation. And again, I think men are now probably trembling a little bit more today than they were, 2 days ago. So I don't know if you want to add to that, Molly.
Well, I think the way, again, the audience is kind of thinking is really this bigger conversation that our country and our world is sort of having right now about supremacy, and male supremacy certainly is what, and white supremacy is coming out in this 9 to 5 movement. But there are, that's what we're working against, is this notion that there is a group of people who somehow feel that they are better than another group of people. And I was just actually making sure that I had a link to share about, white folks who want to do anti-racist work. And one of the first things that we need to do is read up, and there are so many incredible authors, current, you know, but folks from the past who've been writing about this for decades and centuries. And so, you know, just kind of putting that term out there for folks, if you're connecting those dots, right, about, you know, and we see supremacy happen in these intimate kind of relationships, right? But we know it happens in this hugely systemic kind of way. So I just really appreciate the audience, yeah, really sharing your experiences in those ways that help me think about how this is all connected to that term. So thank you, Ava.
That's good. We do have another question. What is a good response to people who get upset when you identify as a feminist instead of as just an equalist?
Ooh. Gosh, I don't know. Let me think about that one for a minute. You have to get back to me. But I think, you know, the first thing is to just sort of, you know, balance that place of standing in your own truth and understanding why why you are claiming the term feminist, standing in that truth, and then also being open. You know, so much of the work that we need to do right now is listen to other people and listen to, you know, people who don't think exactly the way we do. So ask them, well, what do you mean by an equalist or equalist, however we might pronounce it? You know, what do you think about that? But really stand in your own truth and get clear on why you believe what you believe, and know that that's okay.
Would you equate that to like people who say that Black Lives Matter, and then they would say, no, you should say to All Lives Matter instead of Black Lives Matter?
Yeah, that's a great connection, Miriam. Yeah, I mean, that is an important conversation for folks to have, right? That it really, in a lot of ways, what you're doing when you say all lives matter is you're trying to erase racism, and you cannot. And so when you say I'm not going to claim feminism, then you're potentially trying to erase sexist oppression, and you cannot. It exists. And so I think that's a really powerful connection. And the audience member who kind of poses that question maybe wants to look into some of the arguments about the All Lives Matter critique, because there could be some snippets you could grab from that.
So as the 9/5 movement have been able to help a lot the women's status, the workplace, and make it better for women, do you think the Me Too movement has reached the same, has made the same impact, or is on the way to doing that?
Yeah, I think so. At least from what I've seen, I think the Me Too movement, you know, I feel like we probably are losing a little bit of momentum in the last, you know, 8 to 9 months because of the obvious. The pandemic kind of took over the world, and then of course there's the political environment and the divide that this nation is going through. So I think, you know, there are other factors that have, you know, taken, I guess, priority, and other movements taking priority. But Me Too movement, absolutely, I think it's going to continue to make change, and in a big way. And hopefully, again, once now that, you know, there's some peace, I hope, in the horizon, that will come back to the forefront of our conversations, you know, in our day-to-day conversations with each other and with our communities.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, looks like we are almost at the end, but before we leave, I would like to ask, who are the women that inspired you, and what about them inspired you?
Yeah, so I'm gonna say, you know, that when I get that question often, and you know, my answer is always the same. There are many women who have inspired me in my past. And, you know, all of us, you know, I'm a product of my mother, my grandmother, my great grandmother, and all the women before me. And I find somebody new that inspires me just about, you know, just about every month or just about every year. I mean, there's just so many different women that inspire me in very different ways. And, you know, also it's the women of my past, but also the women of my future that inspire me. You know, they're my daughters today and hopefully my great granddaughters. And so for me, it's just, again, I can find inspiration just tonight, you know, all of the chat, all the amazing women on the chat room are an inspiration to me. And so, you know, you're both an inspiration. So for me, I can't just identify one person because there's just so many women who have inspired me throughout my life.
Molly?
I'm reading a lot of bell hooks right now. I get to teach feminist theory this semester. If you don't know bell hooks, you need to. Really amazing theorist, Black feminist theorist, but also really accessible in a lot of ways too. So I'm reading a lot of her. So I'll list her, and I have a huge reading list. I saw that a few different folks posted some lists in the chat, which is really great. I also have a beautiful mother and a sister who I'm really lucky to be in this pandemic with. They're part of my pod, and I couldn't be more thankful for them, for sure. Oh, you're muted, Miriam. There.
Muted. Yeah. Thank you all. And that's it for today. As I said before, it's really, the movie was really inspiring, and you both are really inspiring. So thank you.
Thank you, Miriam. Thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight. Thank you, Molly. Thank you, Miriam.
Yeah, I hope I get to meet you in real time someday.
Yes.
Yes, we will.
Have a good
Bye,
evening,
everybody.
everyone.
Have a great night.
Thank you, you too. Bye, everybody.
Thank you, Julie. Have a good night.
Good night.